All right. Good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Low Code Campfire for Friday, October 28th, 2022. This is episode number 72. And today we'll probably talk a little bit more about import and anything else you want to talk about. I am Dale Warner, head of support for Plantanap, and this is an event we hold this same hour every Friday to foster our community, to share techniques, challenges, experiences, learn something along the way. So this is all skill levels welcome. Anyone who wants to participate, please do. They are recorded. You can see them on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/plantanap. You can use that QR code to subscribe if you want. But subscribe, set the alert so that you get every little bit of stuff that we publish on our channel. We keep a pretty simple agenda. We'll say hello and then gather around the campfire. We'll do first call, perhaps talking about contributions to our campfire website or feature requests, anything submitted in advance, which there was nothing submitted in advance this week. And sometimes we talk about ghost stories and dark corners, places in our products that you haven't been before, perhaps, or places where you had problems. So lots of ways to engage. The main thing is to just get in and talk with us. We're show and tell. You can show app on your screen. You can use the chat window, but do get involved. If you got noise going on behind you, please mute. You can use this QR code to submit questions and topics in advance. That same link is also on the emails that we sometimes send out. I didn't get one sent this week. And with that, I will say hello. See, we have regulars, all regulars today.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
So did anybody come with something that you wanted to talk about first? What's going on? Good. Everything is perfect in your world. All right, I'm going to move on to prepared topics, but along the way, whatever that you want to talk about, let's do it. We are coming to the end of our development cycle on version 1.23, and so just a heads up that our best estimate for the beta test window is next Friday, starting for a week, so November 4th through the 11th, and in the cafe this week, the plan is to talk about our new features, the things that you're going to get in version 1.23, some of which I haven't seen yet. Missed a meeting or two during the travels, but I think we have some pretty good things, some pretty compelling stories coming up. Probably, and Patrick helped keep me on track here. The biggest two that is one of them is multi-environment, people who have a development, staging, production kind of scenario. And so we are moving towards a story where you can do work in development and then push it to the next environment. And then when it's approved in that environment, it can be sent on to the production environment. So that's probably one of the biggest areas of effort that we've been spending time on. And then I believe another is our autocomplete for tokens. And so I think we're going to start seeing some of that. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Patrick, are there any other big areas that, first of all, do I have that right? Second of all, are any other big areas that we're going to be seeing changes?
No, I think that sounds right to me.
Those are the biggest areas. So we'll be covering that stuff within our cafe this week. Good. All right, did anybody see the import Cafe, did anybody have any questions or follow-ups on that? It really was kind of a first level. And I think a lot of you guys, several of you guys are doing far more advanced importing than I got to. All right, in Texas, we say, how about them Cowboys?
Dale, I can share, I guess, real quick what I was sharing with you the other day, that you know, a real life example of something, you know, how somebody's really using that. We have a client that pulls in from the Treasury Department, the United States Treasury Department. They publish a list of well, what does it stand for now? I can't remember now, but it's foreign nationals that are subject to sanctions by the United States government, and it's a list of names basically. And one of their requirements is they have to pull in that list, and whenever somebody registers for their site, they need to check against that list, and if the person is a match, then they don't allow them to register, and they do that daily by downloading a file from the Treasury Department, and they do some pre-processing on the file. So the download, the pre-processing, and the creation of the final file they want to import is all done through a PowerShell script, and then they read the file. And then from there, it's all done within an automation. You know, well, the automation, the PowerShell script is kicked off by a task in plant and app automation, and then once the final file they want to import is created, then they you know, it execute actions. You know, it's creating a list from the CSV file and then executing actions on that file, and on that list, and then creating the table. So yeah, it's a real life example of exactly what you were showing, with a bit more automation in it, because the file is actually being pulled automatically.
Yep.
Daily. Does anybody have thoughts on possible use cases that gives you inspiration about, or something similar that you do?
I get a vendor file every day that comes from one of my vendors. It's emailed, use the email trigger, and then go through and process that and match it to filter out the items that I'm interested in, and then load it. I was happy to see that Dale didn't have any secret process that he was using that I hadn't run across yet that would have saved me time. It's reliable and just keeps going.
Yep. Cool.
Over the years, I have worked with a lot of different products that it depends on what level of transformation is necessary, right? There's a lot of, I think they're called ETL, right? Something transport and load, but a lot of different products that can do a variety of things. One of them was called Inaport, and so it had a structure that basically allowed you to read a file and interact with other perform actions, calculations, build an output record just the way that you wanted it. But so there's, you can buy tools, you can build tools. I think a lot of this could probably be done like by a Razor script, but PowerShell makes a lot of sense. That's one of those that I haven't gotten into. PowerShell. Interesting that you're using the email event, Jim, as a starting point. So at this point, is it for you? Is it 100% automated?
Yes. Yeah. the email triggers off a job, and in the job, I extract the file from the email and then save it. And then once it's extracted, it just becomes normal file processing through a workflow.
Yep.
Using the techniques. And
so
yeah,
are you using what, the IMAP trigger?
the IMAP trigger? Yes.
Yeah, because we've deprecated the POP trigger.
And by using putting the actual logic in the workflow, if for some reason we miss a email or something happens, we can always grab a file manually and put it into the system and trigger the workflow with that.
Yep. So is the kind of data that you have, is it, if you miss one, is that critical, or is the next one?
So what's on this particular vendor, they send me about 15,000 records a day of their current inventory, but they add new items to that inventory, and if they add it and then sell out of it, it will be gone the next day, and I won't know that they have it on order until it actually arrives in their warehouse.
Yep.
It shows their system generates it based on, oh, we generated a purchase order transaction, so it puts it in the file, but then the next day it's not there until it actually arrives. So we use it to be able to inform our customers a status of, this is what's coming.
Do you have people that are looking for particular products, or how do you?
Yes, yeah. Our business, this is our model train store, so we have modelers from all over that contact us, and will order things. Will get announced in a hobby magazine or something like that it's coming, and people will pre-place orders for things, sometimes years in advance. And that's the reason that the grabbing it every day is important, because if we miss a day's file, we may not know about that item, a status of that item for a year, because it could be this. They've locked in their order and they've acknowledged it to us and everything like that. We won't see it again.
Yep. Interesting case. So I assume that vendor is sending that stuff out to similar stores, and
Yeah, they do. They send it. They send it a couple different formats. We got them to send us their internal format, which actually has inventory quantities in it, so we can get an idea of what they have coming. Others just get it on a list with price, because that's what we originally got.
Yep.
But we wanted to know what they have coming and what was allocated and things like that. So we could.
it just sounds like a competitive advantage for you to be able to process that.
I think so. I mean, we haven't. We aren't doing everything we could with it yet, but as we move forward with Planting App and everything, we keep building new features for our store staff to be able to process and give better information to our customers, because that's where we feel our differentiating pieces is our customer service. So.
Yep. Neat. Anyone else with an import story to share? I used to do a lot of imports for people migrating to a new system. So they would be coming from any, who knows what system, whether it was keeping track of their customers by way of Excel spreadsheets, or they had some other CRM system. And then you get this variety of data, and I always I was a representative for a customer that for a company that was selling one particular CRM system. So the target was always the same, but it's how do we fit this odd data into a new into a CRM system? Where does everything go? What's duplicate? And you know, that's when it's useful to have some kind of deduplication tool to run processing, figure out what's extra, what we don't care about, what needs to be translated into some other code or standardized in terms of format. So that it can get quite complex, and you know, oftentimes you would run a I mean, it was never just once, right? You'd get a set of data and process it into an empty system and see what worked and what didn't and what you missed, and get the client to look at it, and then do another. You know, sometimes you could get it in 2 or 3 times, but sometimes it would take a dozen tries to get everything just the way they wanted it. So it's a repetitive cycle to figure out how to do that kind of custom import, and then essentially those typically only happen once. Everybody's different, and so it's kind of a labor-intensive one-time migration.
Well, if we're talking about different import techniques, I wrote a system to handle student information. Here in New York, we recently had a change where we used to record only negative attendance, which is a much smaller data set. You know, just if you don't attend school, you get a record. If there's no record, it's assumed you're in school. Now they want 100% attendance reporting, in school, out of school, doesn't matter. So it's basically, I think, roughly about increased the data load by about 400%. You know, we were going from roughly about 1.3 million records a year. I think we hit 38 million, something like that last year. But the application that I wrote is importing CSV data, and sometimes these files can have hundreds of thousands of records depending on the size of the school and the district. So what I was finding was the person that was going into the system and uploading that file, it could be time consuming to parse all that information and import it. So what I ended up doing was I created kind of like a queue system. So the person uploads the file, it inserts that file's information into a table, and then I had a job that kicked off on the back end, which would immediately start processing. So it would start on a different thread, and then the front end actually used an API call with a refresh of every few seconds, constantly calling that API to get the latest status of that import and its process. So it would tell you, you know, it's imported 100 records, 138 records, 152 records, whatever it is. And then it just keeps giving you that feedback until it's completed and done. So at least the person has some kind of live feedback, because otherwise they were just basically staring at a blank screen and you don't know what's going on.
A spinning widget and did something break, and yeah.
Right. It was nice too, because if, let's say, their data file did have some corrupted data in there that wasn't expected or whatnot, wherever it would crash, you would see the last number of records that was processed. So they could always take a screenshot of that, or just let us know, you know, we were doing an import and it died on, you know, record 328. They themselves could look at the file and say, oh, look, 329. We messed up that data row. There's some bad data in there. So they could potentially fix their own file.
So first off, that's a interesting technique when you've got a lot of volume. Being able to do it that way makes a lot of sense. Second, brings up the topic of flawed data, which always happens when it seems like when you're dealing, especially CSV type stuff, and depending on the quality. I mean, it sounds like the manufacturer and vendor in Jim's case is regularly producing it, and that's one thing. But when it's coming from a lot of different places, that you can have have corruption.
And dates are usually the worst offenders.
So, Ben, what kind of mechanism did you use for providing that response to the users? I mean,
So basically what I did is it's using, in addition to a custom table, it's using a job to actually do the processing. That way it kicks off on a backend thread. That job would update a field in that queue record of what the current status is. So it'll populate how many records it's already been processed, things like that. So as the job is running, it's continuously updating that one record. Then I have an API call. The API call will actually look at that queued record, pull out the current status, and then return that as raw data. And then I display that on the screen to the user. So the user's browser actually has a timer that basically runs, I believe it's every 3 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. And it's just continually pinging, asking through that API, what's the current status of this job? What's the current status of the job? And it keeps sending back that information. So as the job updates, they're getting the most updated information on screen.
and is that message being displayed in a text or a static text box in a form that you're just refreshing? Or do you?
Correct. Yes. So it's basically what I did is I put a text box. I made it read only, and then I just keep on populating that text box.
Okay. Yeah, because
So-
on a different job, I've been trying to play with toast messages and stuff that I have some long running jobs to notify users of the status, and I haven't found a good
Yeah, the
way
problem
to
with
make it look pretty and everything.
the
else.
toast messages, depending on how fast your messages are coming in and how long the messages are, it's kind of hard because if you have long-winded messages, the toast window may be too small and then it wraps outside of the window. Other times, if you have too many messages coming in, a couple of things can happen. If you have them stacked, it's going to look really weird. And if you don't have them stacked, sometimes it looks like your page is having an epileptic seizure because it's blinking these windows, within seconds of each other, or, milliseconds of each other, and it kind of looks weird. And what I also noticed is if you have a situation like that where you're displaying so many toast windows one after another, even if they overlay, the longer it goes, the slower it responds. So in the beginning, you'll see them going really, really, really fast. And then all of a sudden, you'll see them going slower and slower and slower. So there seems to be some sort of overhead there. So for me, I just found that displaying it in just a, plain text box, make it read only. And then I just scroll the text information. So I'm always, as it's going up, I'm scrolling to the bottom of it so they constantly see what the last message was that was returned.
Okay. Yeah, and then because I was going to play with something to pop up a separate little window with a text box in it, like you're describing, and then refreshing that. Because you were watching my screen when I used toast messages, apparently, because everything you just described is what I'm seeing. And I was going to try to pop up a window in it and then somehow capture that window ID so that when my process is done, it could just close it. I haven't found a good solution.
So Ben, are you refreshing the form after you throw some new text in the text box?
So no, because I'm using the API off of an JavaScript AJAX call. So what I'm doing is the form itself has a method that basically it runs itself, or you set it to run. At the end, it sets kind of like a timeout to run again in X many seconds, and it calls itself. So it winds up being recursive. And then that recursive AJAX call will update the text box, but not the entire web page. So there's not constant postbacks, and the information that's coming back from the API call is very minimal. So it's not like a huge amount of data on traffic going back and forth to that page. So it's very quick response, very little overhead. And like I said, you're not updating the entire page, you're just updating that one little text box.
from a,
And
Got it.
you have some monitor in there that watches for the job to complete that then says, okay, stop doing that. Is that
Yes, so that's part of the responses that come back. The Ajax call actually checks for the return response. If the return response is that the job is completed, then it will force terminate that recursive call. It won't make the next call.
so it occurs to me that one of the plant and app features that could be used, and you know, I think technique that you're talking about, Ben, is probably superior from the standpoint of terminating, but within our listings feature, the data source refresh setting to auto with a 3-second, 10-second, 30-second, whatever makes sense to you, but it will trigger the data to come to be reread from whatever the source is. So if you're looking at a queue, for example, if this was a list of jobs and it had percentage complete or number of records or whatever it is, a status, that just turning that on would force this to display on an ongoing basis. If you filtered it based on status, then as the jobs finish, it would automatically diminish, and so it would be one way to display that things were going on and success and failure, and kind of very easy activity monitor.
Yeah, I mean, I've used the grid's auto refresh for more administrative views of queues. So like an administrator coming in, seeing everything that's queued. But like for argument's sake, in my case, individual clients aren't supposed to see what's queued up by other clients. They only see their one queued item. So a grid like that wouldn't work in their respect because I want it to just be their data. And in like my particular case, the status is compounding. So the grid would actually start growing based off of the data that's in there. And I don't want that to happen. I'd rather have that displayed in a text box that's scrollable as opposed to a grid that keeps on growing. The other thing I found, and I don't know if this is something, again, I'm stuck at right now at 118 for other reasons. So I haven't been able to go beyond that, but I know that at least up to 118, one of the things that I have found is that when you set a grid to auto refresh like that, it seems to be random. I have not figured out the reason behind it, but as a matter of fact, I have a system right now that it's showing that. I get a listing inner exception, and it just basically tells me that there was like conversion failed of a certain field or whatever, but all I have to do is refresh the page and it loads correctly. And it'll stay loading correctly and refreshing for a while, and then all of a sudden there seems to be like a network hiccup, and then I get this big fat red error message on the grid, and then that won't go away until I refresh the page again.
So I do think we've made some improvements in that area, and one of the things that we were handling, that I know that we're handling poorly, is that if the underlying site was, if you were essentially logged out of that site, we weren't handling that very nicely. It would just show a red error message, and so we've improved that. But I agree. I do see that what I attribute to be network hiccups will cause that interruption as well. So depending on your use and whether or not it's acceptable to refresh, that might be again, your scenario might be more resilient for what you're doing.
Yeah, like I said, in this case, I don't, other than there being some communication error maybe at the time that it tries to refresh, and I don't know if it's a timeout or whatever, but it comes up with an error message that makes absolutely no sense. Like in this case, I'm staring at one that says conversion failed when converting a date and or time character string. But I know that's a false claim, because if I refresh the page right now, it will load the data perfectly fine. It's just for some reason, something happens on one of those automated refreshes of the grid, it flips out,
And-
and then that error.
And out of
Appears.
curiosity, is that grid, what is the data source? Is it SQL or API?
SQL. Yeah, SQL.
Which should just be,
I mean, I could, if you want, I could even show it to you right now, and then I could show you if I refresh the page, how it'll just immediately pop up.
um, I'd love to see what you're looking at, so let's do that.
Sure. So this is what I'm seeing right now. Hold on, let me move this Zoom thing. So you guys can see it.
Yep.
So
How
this is
long
the
does
error
it
message.
take?
How long does what
Sorry,
take?
Glenn. How long does it take for it to fail like this?
It's completely utterly random. Sometimes it could take 10 seconds after it loads. Sometimes it could be running completely fine for 20 minutes and then all of a sudden die. There seems to be no rhyme or reason to it.
And what's your refresh interval?
I believe it's set to 10 seconds. But as you could see, it's telling me that it's failing on converting a date time. But if I go ahead and refresh the page, then it loads perfectly fine. And it'll stay like this for a while. And then all of a sudden, I come back to it and error message. And these are two different grids, and it happens to both. So this one is always going to have just one row of data. This one could have multiple, as you can see, and both of them just randomly will die. And as you saw, this one died, but this one didn't. And this one continues to refresh perfectly fine, but this one was the one that flipped out. Other times, both will flip out. Sometimes the top one will, the bottom one won't. It's 100% random, at least that I can tell. I haven't found a reason for it.
Is there any chance that the underlying data is being updated and isn't in a format that?
Nope, because the only way to update the data is through the grid. So, I would hit play or stop. That's about it. Or I add a new one. That's pretty much the extent of editing. And I'm the only one. This is on my local machine. This isn't even on a server or anything. It's literally my local machine with a local instance of SQL.
Which doesn't make much sense in terms of like a network hiccup. It would be, yep, interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that.
So I don't know if it has to do with the speed, too many requests coming in too quickly. I don't know, but it's
Memory usage?
What was that?
Memory usage?
It shouldn't be.
That's something you could watch.
It really,
I'm using about 50% of my memory, and you saw that it already errored out. And I'm working on a system with 32 gigs.
You would have to watch it over time to see if it climbs, while it's refreshing over and over.
I think I'm just
I'm
going to
sorry.
take this as a challenge to see if the developers can look at resilience in this area, because even if something does go wrong, I would have hoped that it would recover from it. But like once it blows up, it doesn't try again. And what you said, if it just refreshed again in the next interval, it would be fine.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, right, as you can see, I thought it was 10 seconds, but it's actually 30 seconds. But what would be nice is if you select auto with the refresh interval, maybe to have like another area either underneath or next to it to say on error, do the following. Refresh immediately, refresh in 10 seconds, whatever. Because I mean, I would like it maybe within seconds of a failure to just retry again, not wait the full 30 seconds.
Mhm.
That way that error message may pop up, but it'll only pop up for like a second or two, and then it'll go away at the next refresh. But when that error happens, those refreshes completely stop.
There's a ongoing project that we have talking about on error, that, for example, some of our actions have the on error stack and some of them don't. Lots of them don't. And so we're talking about making for actions for all of them to have on error. And then you get to decide what to do if things go wrong. And it occurs to me that like that data source on error, yes, we could put in a new refresh number, which would make sense. But if we just had an on error, then you can decide what to do. Right? For example, you could have a wait for 3 seconds and then refresh action, but or you could refresh the whole page, or yeah. So a couple of different suggestions there for data source refresh. So good discussion.
We didn't mean to jinx you, Jim.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just funny that email popped in while we're having the discussion, and I'm looking through their log, and it seems like the user put an ampersand in the middle of their data file.
Like we said, you can't control it, the data sometimes when it comes from a client.
Let's see. So upcoming cafes. I think this week again we're going to talk about the new features in 123, and hopefully we'll have a more exhaustive list than the 2 that I mentioned. The week following, we have we're working on an internal project to bring in data from a number of sources to do a knowledge base. And by the way, this is neither, I'm just being conversational here, right? But we have a gentleman, Angel, who is his first name Angel, that is working on our documentation. And so where our documentation for a long time has been static, it's now actively being worked on and improved. So one guy responsible for that, and to get all of our new things documented, as well as go back and improve the old, and so that's an ongoing project. But bringing in information that we have from a variety of sources, Campfire, Cafe, our different videos, our documentation, bring it all into one place. So one of our campfires coming up is dedicated to that. I'm just going to throw it out there. If there's topics that you would like to see us address, it'd be a great place to chat about them.
And we mentioned something now.
Yeah, that was my hope. I'm vamping, trying to fill the next 22 minutes.
Okay, cool. So, it's been discussed previously. Now would be a good time to revisit that when we go looking for documentation, when we see something that maybe used to be true but isn't anymore, or maybe there's a hole in the docs and we could contribute to that, it would be excellent if there were a way to indicate that, bring attention to a piece that needs some attention, or maybe even fill it in with some possible content. It'd be totally fine that someone there would review what was contributed before publishing, but at least, we see that stuff. So it'd be cool if we could tag it, flag it, change it, get it approved.
That's a great suggestion. And there's when we in terms of the knowledge base project, we are definitely planning to have user contributions being part of, I mean, if you wanted to write an article and include it in our knowledge base, that would be something we hope would happen. But separate from that, a more direct feedback mechanism on our documentation, that sounds like we should have a spot to submit those and have them go directly to Angel. So I will bring that to that initiative.
Crowdsourcing.
Yeah, so you know, our documentation is it is on Git, but and could potentially be manipulated there, but it actually gets fed to it from another system. So I don't think that, you know, I don't think we're going to see a direct. Here's a suggested change to the documentation that I think it's going to be more in terms of here's a you know, pointing to an area and here's a suggestion. I do it all the time in terms of saying, for example, I think this should say, and then do that. In the same way, I've been doing that a lot with our internal documentation. The inline stuff sometimes falls behind or isn't quite accurate, doesn't represent. So yeah, I would love to have a spot for those to come in and give Angel a steady queue of things to work on.
Sounds good. And thanks for getting Angel.
Oh yeah, I was thrilled because yeah, as you know, lots of times the DNN Sharp documentation is still the best for some of the stuff that we have, and that's and yet it ages. It hasn't moved much in years, so it's definitely the right step. So aside from, I mean, the knowledge base will come out and have information from a variety of sources, and that really is the nature of the cafe, how to bring a bunch of sources together into one search boost kind of output. But then most of our new documentation is going to be on the learn.plantanapp.com site. So, you know, we're hoping to have a single source for good, solid documentation. Talking about the knowledge base, I forgot to mention Academy is another of the sources. So we're trying to get stuff. We've got a lot of different sources, trying to make it all be far more usable. And yeah, so we'll save some.
It's like a great plan.
You know, if the plan is for any type of multi-level documentation where there's so much stuff where we're trying to make Planted App easy for a non-programmer, but there's information like I know Ben has shared over the campfires where, oh, if you go to this table, we can search for something and figure out how to do something else.
Yep.
That kind of documentation going to come out and be more formal.
Maybe
at an advanced level type thing.
So we have the mechanism in the plan to address that. We're dividing things out into general information, no code, low code, pro code. I think that there is, you know, we're anticipating that these deeper topics be part of the documentation. That's the initial plan to address that. But what we want to publish, and then yeah, exactly. I mean, then there's the writing of those particular articles. That's, you know, another level to that.
I think it's like the stuff that goes out in the Campfire is very helpful and educational in the Campfire website, but I think it can be intimidating, some of it, to somebody who's trying to learn the tool. Right? Mm-hmm. You know, especially when you're trying to get an audience of more business users.
Absolutely. So I know I'm jumping around. We were talking about 123 a little while ago. I spent and the features that you're going to get. I spent my yesterday with my 80 whatever it is tests that I run that are all built on the scenarios that you guys submit, right? When you say, hey, something's wrong and we need to fix it, I build a scenario, and then forever after I run that again to make sure we don't regress on that particular issue. And my testing yesterday came up with 2 very small things that are going to be, I'm sure, will be fixed in the even by beta. So I'm very encouraged by 123 release, and then we're also actively, I know there's some of you that are interested, we're also actively working on the compatibility with DNN 911. There were some issues, and we want to be able to make sure that going forward, at least, that 123 and on will be compatible with 911. Cool. There were no new Campfire additions. I don't think that there are. On the feature requests, you know, I'll stir it up here a little bit. I'm still sharing my screen, right?
Yes.
Thank you. We had Roberto, who sometimes participates in this group, had put some feature requests, and you know, he kind of asked for this for that again, some of this same stuff again this week. So I'll just mention it. This one particularly, the ability to create, update, delete app objects via the system, via system API, or I don't know that I mean, that's the way he envisions it. What happened there? That's odd. Oh, there it is. It just took forever to load. Okay. So to be able to manage importing, exporting almost anything, and so to me, this sounds terribly handy. He's also interested in doing it from the standpoint of programmatically building the objects versus just transporting something that he's built. So to be able to build a form, for example, dynamically, and then transport it. So kind of interesting. We're working on pieces of this, right? I mentioned the multi-environment setup that we're dealing with right now. I'm very much a fan of the idea of being able to move anything from one to copy to build things in a target environment. I know Ben has talked about that a lot in some of the sites that he runs. But I think this would be the thing that would actually make it possible for us to have a marketplace, which I think is going to be key to usability and our growth as well. So anyway, anybody wanted to?
Just out of curiosity, in what this feature request is showing here, I mean, he's talking about having an API specifically, but if you had, I mean, if you guys do like what you did with modules, because we could do that right now programmatically with modules. There's actions to import and export.
Mm-hmm.
If you added actions for the rest of them, tokens, workflows, jobs, so forth, so on, you wouldn't necessarily need an API because we could build the API ourselves as long as we have the actions to actually perform it.
I absolutely agree. Export job could be a action. Import job could be an action.
Because then at least, you would only create the APIs that you need. So you wouldn't have to have all these extra APIs floating around for import exports of things that you would never use. But if you need it, create an API for, importing or whatnot, and just use the actions at our disposal.
I absolutely agree. We haven't, you're right, we did it at the module level, but not at the, some of these things that have components like jobs and workflows. So interesting case for expanding on those. Anyway, anybody else have a feature request that they want to call out? Lobby for.
There was one in there, Dale, that I didn't contribute, but I think it might have been Roberto, about the ability to create tokens on the fly. I'm not sure which one
Oh,
it
create.
was.
So, I mean, creating a core token, a token, yeah. Essentially being able
Yeah,
to
it's not.
implement tokens.
Yeah, I had so dynamically create tokens while a process is running, and I had read his request previously and thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And then just this past week, I had a situation where I actually needed it. I thought, oh, wow, I really could have used that.
Oh, well, here's one.
I was about to ask you, is there any update on that? You beat me to it.
Yeah, that one is actually a hot fix in 122. So, yep.
Oh, great.
See if I can. Man,
No one updated the feature request.
This is running incredibly slowly for me.
I'm experiencing the same thing, Dale, on my end. Very slow.
Yeah, we get off this call. I'll have to sit there. Make
Yeah.
sure something runaway processing on this server. Yep. Well, yeah. Do you? I'm going to shoot a message to the department there.
Just so you know, it looks like the entire community website is kind of slow because I'm just trying to load it up and I'm staring at a blank white screen.
Yep.
Do you think, Ben, loading that 18 million row CSV file into Campfire is a problem?
Shh.
Okay. Let's see. This is actually. I have to work through the process here. We did this, so how can I? I'll edit it to say it's done, but yeah, here we go. All right. No sense in waiting for that. Good. And any closing thoughts? Otherwise, we will adjourn to our afterglow segment. All right, I'm going to do that. It's been a good almost hour with you guys. We'll do this again next Friday, although I think you might have a guest host or have Patrick take first chair. We'll see. I haven't cleared that with him yet, so watch the look on his face. But one way or another, we'll bring it to you again next week. So thanks for attending, and I'm going to turn the recording off. Hang around for Afterglow.